Well, we usually think of play and productivity as being opposites, that we're one or the other. We're either being productive or we're just kicking back and having fun. But I think that they actually can really work together and enhance one another. When we bring play into our work, then we're so much more productive. We tap into momentum. We forget how much work we're doing because we're having so much fun. So, a playful attitude or approach or gesture to work makes us so much more productive and successful. And then on the other hand, when we bring a sense of productivity into our play, then play is no longer just something that happens for no reason, or it's not just a mind numbing escape. It has a reason, it has an intention. Our play becomes conscious. We engage in intentional play. Play isn't an activity, it's a state of mind. Play is a portal to presence. Play is how we touch something of enchantment and wonder, and play is our superpower to get things done. My philosophy of action is really simple. It comes down to a simple phrase: what moves us is what moves us. And what that means is whatever moves us emotionally is what moves us into action. So, our intention, our challenge, our game is to look for what moves us emotionally and to learn what that feels like in the body so that we can harness that and use what is moving us emotionally to propel us into action. Meaningful play is really important, especially because in these fast paced times today, we're on such sensory overload that our adrenaline is either charged up or tuned out. There's often nothing in between these two poles. We're either in major fight or flight response, or at the end of the day, we are just flat. We're exhausted, we're watching TV, we're plugged into whatever mind numbing activity. Play gets lost in there. Meaningful play is kind of the sweet spot in between that charged up energy and that tuned out mind numbing state. I think more than anything, Hop, Skip, Jump is an idea book. What I see in working with clients and students is that they love the idea of making their process and their work more playful, but may not have an idea of how to start. And if I just throw them at an idea, then they will grab on to what intrigues them or interests them or makes them light up. And so this book is here to be your playmate, your companion, to say, hey, why don't you try this? You're in the hop stage? Give this a try. You're skipping? Let's give this a whirl. You ready to jump? I'm ready to make jumping fun. We all have a phase in which we're most comfortable, although it is all three phases that work together that really bring us the sense of a harmonious fulfillment. And so I think we all can benefit from having more fun in our strength and also tapping into some playful ways, entering through some playful portals to get into some of those other energetics. So, for example, I'm a jumper. I want to just jump in and make something happen. And that's great. However, my results and my experiences are so much more fulfilling and successful and a match of what I was envisioning when I also place energy in the hop phase. that is thinking, dreaming, planning, and skip phase, experimenting, trying new things, getting some data and some feedback. So that's my personal example of how to take something that I'm really good at, have more fun with it, really claim it as my own, and then also strengthen other parts of me. The important thing to note about anything that's related to a diagnostic of sorts is that, first of all, one type or one approach is not better than the other. In fact, they all three work together, and so it just helps to know where your primary strength or your organic inclination is. And then the other thing to emphasize is that you don't have to be anything that you're not. Hop, skip, jump is not about turning you into somebody else or changing the way that you go about making things happen. It's about tapping into some things that you may not have tried yet and kind of tricking yourself to try them because you'll be having so much fun. Creative people are often criticized for skipping all around and, flitting from one thing to another. There's a phenomena that's often used, shiny object syndrome, which is actually defined as being too attached to shiny objects, and it's something that is looked down upon. And a lot of creative people think, what's wrong with me? I just keep getting pulled in other different directions. And I think part of the healing is saying that shiny object syndrome is really cool. It's a superpower. It means that there's something inside of you that knows what you want and knows what's bright and knows what's shiny and leans into that. And accepting that as something to be proud of and something to use is so different than using that as something to criticize yourself over. Following shiny objects is awesome. And so part of accepting oneself in the skip phase is about saying, hey, I get to go wherever my energy wants to take me. One of my favorite stories that I think really demonstrates the breadth of the power of play is a client who was overwhelmed in trying to learn tutorials for digital art for a project she was working on. She found it so overwhelming. Every time she thought of the word tutorial, she just froze. And so we played with some wordplay, one of my favorites, to see if there was something else that she could call this project instead of tutorials. So we looked at the word tutorials, and I asked her, well, what word comes to mind when you look at that word? And she said, well, the word tulip somehow. I see the word tulip in there. And so we played with the idea of shifting tutorials to become tulip Orioles. And what happens when now she is working or playing with her tulip Orioles? What does that mean? And all of a sudden, everything just opened up. Oh, I can tiptoe through them one at a time. I can buy some tulips and put them near me so that the act becomes an act of beauty. Oh, I can stop and just smell and take in the beauty that I'm working with instead of just focusing on the technology. So just a simple switch of a few letters changed the word tutorial to tulip Oriole, and all of a sudden she couldn't wait to buy her tulips and sit down at her computer. Well, I had a blast writing this book, and it was so much fun to put together. Whenever I was feeling stuck, I just moved into something playful, like creating the haikudoodles, which are haiku poems that the reader is invited to embellish with his or her own doodles and drawing. Part of the research for the book was studying vintage toys and games and the history of play through toys in our world. I learned so much about toys and the metaphors that they carry with them and how we can learn from them. The history of the Easy Bake Oven, it was inspired by someone who saw chestnuts being roasted on New York City corners and thought, well, how could we turn that into a toy so that kids could have the experience of imitative play, of baking. And I don't know if you remember having an Easy Bake Oven, but the results didn't taste so good. But it didn't matter because there was that wonderful sense of creation and look, I did this. Well, we look in the chapter of Hop, Skip, Jump, we look at the Easy Bake Oven as a metaphor in the jump phase for asking the question, how will I know when it's baked? How do I know when it's done? What does it mean in my situation to stick a toothpick in the thing I've made in the Easy Bake Oven and see if it's ready? What is the criteria? And how can we play with anything that's getting in the way? I wanted the book to be really easy to use and for someone to be able to flip it open to any page and find a tip. There are 75, so there are plenty to choose from. And so anytime that you're needing that little boost, that little gem of an idea, that little spark, just open up the book and see what's there for you. The chapters are short. They immediately go into an invitation to try this. There's space to doodle. There are silly word games and fun things to kind of get you out of your serious mindset no matter what you're working on. What do you want to create in your life? And what happens if instead of working hard to make it happen, if you allow yourself to enter into play?